Hello, and welcome to this overview of our new software, Actionable Systems. My name is Nicholas, and I will be guiding you through this slide deck. Actionable Systems is specifically designed to help policymakers and other participants in navigating complex systems for policymaking. You'll be hearing about the unique needs of software for policymaking, as well as how our software tackles these needs and see some of our examples. Thank you. First, I'd like to share some legal information about the software and acknowledge our funding sources. The development of this software was supported by a grant from the Global Obesity Prevention Center, which is based at Johns Hopkins University. The grant was awarded to Dr. Giovanelli to create computer models that can help develop policies for obesity in England. As part of this effort, Dr. Giovanelli and his team developed a new software, Actionable Systems, which focused on the policy side. The content of this presentation and the software are solely the responsibility of Dr. Giovanelli and his team. It does not necessarily represent the official views of the NIH. If you have any questions about the software or this presentation, you can contact Dr. Giovanelli through the email given in the slide. We've created a software to help people make sense of complex systems to develop and assess public policies. So first, I'll tell you a little bit about what complex systems look like and their role in policymaking. We'll specifically be looking at systems in the form of networks, also called graphs or maps. Then we'll discuss how much networks can be navigated for policymaking. That is, what are the key functions that software should provide so that we can look at a network, interact with it, and derive meaning. We'll also briefly talk about how current software provides some, but not all of these functions. Then we'll present our new software, and we'll do so from examples. A new book came out in 2017 with a quote that nicely summarizes the way we think. When you look at infectious diseases, they may not be simple, but we understand relatively well the process by which someone gets sick. However, in Canada and the United States, much of the burden on population health now comes from chronic diseases. Take obesity as an example. There are so many factors that contribute to changes in weight. That's a disease with multifactorial roots. To deal with such conditions, our population health tools need to understand how many factors come together in shaping health. Let's take obesity as a guiding example so you can see what we mean with multifactorial and how we look at it as a system. Imagine a simple question, which you may discuss with your friends. What would be the top 2 or 3 things you'd do to solve obesity? Take a few seconds to think about it. Some of the solutions you'll typically hear or think of may include move more and eat less. But do you really think that is that simple? If you think about the one thing we need to fix, you look at a complex system in a very naive way. It may be a very good place to start brainstorming, but there is much more to a problem than that. Physical activity or food behavior are some of the many factors that contribute to one's weight, and they are not isolated. They do have interactions, in fact many interactions. In systems thinking, we don't ignore these interactions, we try to represent them. Let's start with the key factor we care about, obesity. What does it link to? What affects obesity? You can go one level higher and start asking, what are the links? You can think of physical activity, because the more physical activity you have, the less obesity. You can think of food behavior too, because what and how much you eat will affect our body composition. That's just taking a look at distance 1, what directly affects obesity. Now let's take a look at distance 2 by going just one step further. And you can keep doing that. For example, recreational physical activity also depends on where you live, what's around you, what you can afford, and so on. That can lead to sizable maps, with many factors and links, but having a bunch of factors and links is not thinking in systems just yet. What we have here is a much simpler version of reality. If that simple view was reality, we could fix the problem easily. For example, we could just boost the recreational physical activity. Then physical activity goes up and obesity goes down. Problem solved. Take a few seconds and think about what our little map may be missing. What we've looked at were just causal chains. You expect to have an input somewhere, get your output somewhere else, and that's it. The reality is that we have many, many loops. For example, the more physical activity we have, the less obesity. And the less obesity, the easier it is to engage in physical activity. So neither one is an input or an output. They are part of a loop. Some very comprehensive maps have been developed that have many loops and so on. For example, the Foresight obesity map was developed out of the UK and is one of the most famous ones in obesity research. So we may think, great, we have a big map that tells us about how many things are connected. So now we should be able to use all this information to make more informed policies, right? In a 2014 paper, Sialku, Morgan, and Cheel summarized that many people think of the Foresight obesity map. They summarize it as complicated, incomprehensible, and complex. And that can be true, if all you do is look at the map as if it was a poster. But a large map is not made to be just looked at. A large map is made to be interacted with. Look at the zoomed-in version of a large map. If that's all you can see, sure, it's awful. But what if we can start to interact with it? We could ask, how? Where is obesity in the system? What directly affects it? It looks like mental well-being is an important factor too when it comes to obesity. Let's have a look at mental well-being. This kind of exploration allows us to unpack all the knowledge of the map. Just looking at it would not be useful. And we can even start to ask questions that directly relate to the policies in the map. Imagine I want to improve obesity. That's the outcome monitored by my policy. My intervention will target stress, but to really evaluate my intervention, I should know what happens in between. What's going on between stress and obesity? Let's just see it in the map. We pinpoint stress and obesity, making it easy to see within the map. Other factors happening in between, like weight bias and socioeconomic status. We can even see which ones of these relationships are more or less important, depending on how thick the connections are. This illustrates that interactive visualizations can help, rather than just trying to stare at the whole thing. We've identified 5 tasks that a software should support so that you can really make sense of a network of many interacting factors. These 5 tasks were chosen because they are key concepts in systems thinking or because of the results from experimental studies. The first task is to be able to see the loops. Just saying that loops are important is necessary but not sufficient to make it a key task. If something was important but you could deal with it on your own, then why would you need a software to deal with it? If the software is going to support you, it's because you have something useful to do, and you need support for it. We already know that loops are important, and experimental studies have shown that people struggle to track them. Together, these facts are telling us that we need software support for loops. The second task is to see the paths. They are very useful, both to plan and to evaluate a policy. We've already illustrated it in the case of stress and obesity, so I'll just remind you briefly with an example. Imagine that you create an intervention that targets weight bias. You monitor its effect on mental well-being. You need to know what's going on in between. One path may be a total failure and the outcome as a whole is not improving, but another path may have worked well and your intervention is actually not useless. Similarly to loops, people have a hard time keeping track of multiple paths. Studies have shown that people simplify loops and multiple paths, so they need help from software. Looking at multiple paths is better than just looking at the intervention and its measured outcomes, but sometimes we need to know more than that. Even if a factor doesn't lie on a path, it's important to know what our intervention impacts. We may be changing parts of the system that we never intended to. We could also have benefits elsewhere, which should be found when evaluating the intervention. The third task is to look at rippling effects. In rippling effects, the question is, what gets affected by my intervention, even if it doesn't relate to the outcome? On this example, you see that the intervention affects one orange factor directly and 2 indirectly. These may not have been seen when looking at multiple paths because they don't lead to the measured outcome. Note that when looking at rippling effects, you usually need some filtering. If you look at everything that eventually gets affected, you may end up with the whole map, and that's just not manageable. In short, the third task is to filter rippling effects. Policies have to be evidence-based. However, the evidence may be all over the place. A lot of time is spent on gathering it from multiple resources. From our pilot study with policymakers, we found that maps can serve to put all the evidence together. One can find a factor in the map and ask, What does research say about that? Large maps also have factors from multiple domains, so the evidence can help to clarify what factors even mean. For example, dyslipidemia or restricted covenants may be part of your map, and you're reading it without expertise on these topics. If you can ask the software to tell you more about the terms, you'll be saving time and money. The fifth task is to take into account the workflow that people have. We can't create a new software, expect that nothing existed before, and ask people to rewrite everything from scratch just for the software. People may have created their maps using map visualization tools like Gephi or Vis1. They may also have created specific types of maps. Mental Modeler creates maps for participatory modeling, while Vensim makes system dynamics models. At the very least, a new software needs to be able to work with these ones and open the maps they create. We've just discussed the 5 key tasks. If there was a software out there that already handles them all, or almost all, we wouldn't be talking now. We've assessed a lot of software, both popular and less known. We found extremely little support for these 5 tasks. Here's an example from the software Health Info. It doesn't support paths, loops, rippling effects, and was made for a single dataset, but it conveniently lets you access definitions and evidence. Here's another one called Kinetics. It doesn't do loops and paths, but it does rippling effects with rather advanced filtering options. Another one named Vensim does loops and rippling effects, but not paths. So there really is a need for a new software here. And now I'm going to show you how Actionable Systems does all these 5 tasks. Welcome to Actionable Systems. The software was developed by the DocB lab led by Dr. Giovanelli. This is the home screen when you first open the software. As you can see, it tells you some of the things that you can do within the software and things we're going to cover in this tutorial. It allows you to see your system, measure your system, edit your system, and compare your system. If you have any questions or want to run things on your own, you can go to tutorials and it'll help you out there. The first feature we're going to go over is the Open feature. This allows you to open systems or maps to be used in the software. We don't expect you to go out and create maps just for the software, and this allows you to go on with your current workflow without hindering it much. So first we're going to hit Open, and it brings up this prompt. And it has a bunch of different files that we support, and if you're unsure of what the file looks like, when you hover over it, it shows a picture of what the file and the data looks like. In this tutorial, we're going to use the Hierarchical Network file type. This requires 2 files, one edge file and one category file. First we're going to hit it and we'll open the list of edges. So we will find that, open, and we have to find the category file. There it is, and then hit open. This will open up your system. As you can see, now the hierarchical network is open. It has its group of categories and the connections between the categories. The size and the colors of the lines have a significant meaning. The green and red indicates an increase or a decrease, and the thickness of the line, whether it's thick or thin, indicates a strong or a weak impact on another category. So if you double click on any of the categories, it will unpack the category into its factors. So we'll hit weight. So this unpacks it, and we have the 3 factors: obesity, unhealthy weight control practices, and thoracic abdominal obesity. So if we double click on any of these factors, it'll pack it up back to its original state. And now we're back at the original hierarchical network that we first opened. We just went over how the software can be used to open existing systems or maps to be used and viewed in the software. Now we're going to show how to analyze the cycles. So if you go to the top right and click Analyze Cycles, this screen opens up one of the loops within the system. At the bottom you can see a list of every single loop within the system. And each entry has the start, the end, and the size of the loop with how many edges or nodes it has. So if we hit this one, it has 4 edges and it brings up this loop. This shows the relations that each one of them has on each other, as well as the type of loop, which can be used to show the dynamics within your data or system. The third feature is the Pathways tool. This allows you to choose an intervening factor and an ending factor and see all the pathways between the two factors. So we click the Pathways tool, and on the left you choose the intervening factor. In this case we're going to do weight bias, which you can either select this way, or you can, instead of clicking on it, you can type it in, so weight bias. Hit enter, choose it, and then choosing the end factor. The ones that have no relation to it, or there's no pathways, they'll be grayed out, so it limits the ones that you can choose. But you can also type here the factor that you want to find. So mental well-being, and enter, and then you do see pathways, and in this case there are 6. So we hit OK. So this tool shows every single pathway between two factors. So weight bias has a very weak impact on socioeconomic status, but socioeconomic status has a very strong impact on mental well-being. This can be helpful because it shows every single pathway within your system, whether it was known or unknown to you. After you're understanding the pathways between two factors, you can hit Save Results to save the results of this particular pathway in your system. The fourth part of this tutorial is the Rippling Effects tool. This can be used to show the effects of intervening on a particular factor. So if we click on this button, it takes us to this tab that makes us choose a factor to intervene on. So we choose weight bias. And then we select this factor, and then we choose how far it will cascade through the system. So here we have, it'll go to 2. So from weight bias, it'll go to healthy eating or ability to engage in physical activity, and thus forth. So all of these will be in this little spiral graph. We hit OK, and it shows the relation on our intervening factor and how it cascades through the system. Now this will show factors that may not be in the original Pathways tool, and this can be used to help understand the rippling effects of intervening on a particular factor. Now we're going to look at the Description tool. This allows you to import text files into your system so you can view factors and understand them more freely. So we'll hit disease, and then we'll go here and do load. We'll find the descriptions folder with text files in it, load it, it'll give you this nice message. And then on any of the factors, you can right click and then do tell me more about asthma. And it gives you the description and evidence of clinical papers and sources that are involved in this factor. And then if you don't like what you see, or if you can't see anything, you can increase the size of it so you can read it, but you can also edit it too. And then hit save, and it'll save it to the text file. The next feature we're going to go over is the measurement tool. This allows us to gather valuable statistics about our system. We click measure, and it shows 5 of the very common measures of the system. We can click on degree distribution, and this shows the out degrees of the nodes within our system, or we can hit average distance, which shows the average distance within our system is 1.45. This means that if we intervene on a particular node, it'll cascade through the system really fast because the system is very connected. The next feature in this program is the Edit tool. This allows us to manipulate our system by adding, deleting, and altering the connections between particular factors. So we click Edit, and we open a particular category, such as Built Environment. Here we can perform these modifications on these nodes. So if we click delete, we can click on these and remove them. Now all this information is not stored yet unless you hit save, but we can undo the changes that we make and make sure that none of the data is lost. The next tool that we're going to discuss is the compare tool. This allows us to import a system into the software and compare it to a previously loaded network or system. So we hit compare, and we see that we have the hierarchical network example 1, which is what we loaded previously, and now we're going to select the new file. In this case, we're going to do the mental modeler file or participatory network. We click it, and now we find the other system. And we have the .mmp for mental modeler. We open it, and now it gives us statistics related to these two networks or systems. This number down here is probably the most useful because it shows how different they are between each other, and the lower the number, the better. And then we have the loops, the edges, links, and then distances between, or how different these are. Thank you for watching this tutorial on actionable systems. Hopefully it was helpful and informative in your understanding of how to use the software. But once again, this software was developed by the DocB lab led by Dr. Giovanelli. If you would like to understand more about this software or the missions of our lab, visit www.docb.com. Thank you.